April 29th, 9:30 a.m. meeting of the TSERS and LGERS Retirement Systems Board of Trustees meeting to order. If you'll stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to open our meeting this morning and with our thoughts and prayers toward the community of Watauga County and Boone, and on behalf of Deputy Logan Fox and Chris Ford, who have lost their lives in the line of duty over the last 72 hours. And many of you have been keeping up with this situation. It's been a horrific situation, to say the least. And it's just another reminder that when we do the work of this board, we're doing it on behalf of those that teach, protect, and serve. That's the majority of what we do. But unfortunately, when we have incidents where our members are killed in the line of duty, then we have to rally and support those families on these very important, tough topics. So if you wouldn't mind joining me in bowing our heads just for a moment in honor of these families and these officers. Thank you very much. The Pledge of Allegiance. I'm sure everybody has joined us by phone. Homer Dearman's just a little bit late, but he's on his way, so we look forward to his and others' arrivals. Please note that anyone who wishes to comment in the public comment section, please sign up with Patty. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted online as with all the board materials. We ask that you mute your phone or your computer if you're not speaking. We'll be taking roll call votes by name, and without objection, anybody who makes a motion or second, without objection, we'll be considering those to be a yes to make the meeting more efficient. Board members, if you leave the meeting at any point, please announce your departure, whether virtually or here. If you return, please announce your return as well, and all these items will be recorded in the meeting minutes. Likewise, when you speak, please state your name. And finally, any text or other recorded communications between board members during the meeting, even on personal cell phones, are considered public record to the extent they concern the meeting itself. We will now do a roll call.
Treasurer, just a couple of things. So we have a few people who want to make public comment, okay. And that's so if there's others, it's Patty, PATTI.hall@nctreasurer.com. And then the other thing is, for those in the room, the microphones seem to be working pretty well. So, speaking one at a time or other noise, it picks up and it makes it harder to hear for the others who aren't here. So I just wanted to point that out. So I'm going to take the teasers. Dale Falwell. Present. Barbara Gibson.
Present.
Catherine Truitt. Dirk German.
Present.
Greg Patterson.
Present.
Jeffrey Winstead. Here. John Ebbinghausen.
Present.
Joshua Smith.
Present.
Lance Brewer.
Present.
Linda Gunter. Linda, I don't hear you if you're on mute. I don't hear Linda. Margaret Reeder.
Here.
Oliver Holly.
Good morning and present.
Good morning. And Vernon Gammon. Vernon, I don't hear you either. So I don't have Vernon. We have a forum. And then LGERS. Dale Falwell is here. Alan Wansey.
Present.
Brenda Howerton.
Here.
Catherine Truitt is not. Clee Atkinson. Clee, I don't hear you. If you was that you, Clee? I'm sorry. Did I hear Clee Atkinson? So Clee's not. Patterson.
Present.
Homer Dearman.
Present.
Jeffrey Morse. I don't hear Jeffrey Morse. Kevin Gordon.
Hey, good morning, Tom. Present.
Good morning. Lance Brewer.
Present.
Melody Brady.
Present.
Tony Brown. Present. And Vernon Gammon.
Okay, we have a quorum. We do. Our Ethics Act, members, ethics, awareness, identification, potential conflict of interest. Moment to review the agenda. Does anyone review the agenda? Does anyone potential or the appearance of conflict of interest?
If you could, echo.
Unless everybody wants to hear the actuarial report.
Uh-oh.
Somebody on the call is please mute your phones if you're not speaking. So if everybody will please look at their audio settings to ensure that they are indeed muted, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Can we mute them from here?
If we mute them, sir, then we would be unable to unmute them when they need to speak, so they have to self-mute.
Statement of economic interest, please review the SEI evaluations that were completed for our TSERS and board meeting. Morning, Jeff. And these evaluation letters are part of the public record. And are there any questions regarding the SEI evaluation? Okay, hearing none. TSERS board meeting minutes from January 28th. Do I hear a motion for the TSERS board to accept the minutes?
Linda Gunner, I move to accept the minutes.
Okay. Okay, John, a second.
And I am present.
All right. Thank you. We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Dale Falwell.
Aye.
Barbara Gibson.
Present.
Catherine Truitt, not attending. Dirk German.
Present.
We're approving the state minutes. Your name.
Yeah.
Brett Patterson.
Aye.
Jeffrey Winstead. Aye. Joshua Smith.
Aye.
Lance Brewer.
Aye.
Margaret Reeder.
Aye.
Oliver Holly.
Aye.
Good. Thank you. The motion passes. Likewise for the LGERS meeting minutes of January 28th. Do I hear a motion? Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Jeff Morris makes a motion. I hear a second for LGERS.
I'll second.
Thank you, Tony.
Alan Points, second.
Motion's a second. Any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Dale Falwell.
Aye.
Alan Wansey.
Aye.
Brenda Howerton. Brenda Howerton. Brenda, you might be on mute. Catherine Truitt, no, Catherine's not here. Clee Atkinson is not. Greg Patterson.
I'm on. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay.
Cleac.
That's Clee.
Yeah, I answered up earlier, so you couldn't hear me.
Okay. Thank you, Clee. Greg Patterson.
Yes,
Aye.
Homer Dearman.
Aye.
Kevin Gordon. Lance Brewer.
Aye.
Melody Brady.
Aye.
And all right.
Very good. Thank you, members. We'll now go to item 5, our RSD operations, member services, and compliance update, which will be presented to you by Richard Lopez, Director of Operations, Vicki Roberts, Director of Member Services, and Patrick Kinlaw, Director of Policy, Planning, and Compliance. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. In operations, first starting off with retirement processing section, we had nearly 300 more retirement requests in the first quarter of 2021, totaling almost 4,500 retirement requests for that quarter from the previous year. Our goal average from application received when we send the 6E to the member for elections options is 30 days, and we exceeded that in this first quarter. Turnaround times at 24.9 days in January, 13.4 in February, and 11.3 in March. For anyone who applied at least 60 days prior to their retirement, our goal is set at 99% paid on time. 9 of the 12 months we had 100%, and the other 3 were 99.8, 99.9, and 99.9. For benefits processing and deaths, we had 3,472 deaths reported in the first quarter of 2021, which is more than 1,000 increase from the first quarter of 2020. We've been working some overtime to continue to meet the turnaround time goal of 45 days from the time of the death notification received to completion. Really not sure if that increase in deaths is related to COVID. The death certificates don't specify that. But the increase is unprecedented. 1,263 of the deaths reported in January were reported in January, and we had a turnaround time of 29 days. We had 1,128 reported in February with a turnaround time of 29.6 days, and then 1,081 reported this past March with a turnaround time of 31.2 days. So we're still well under that 45-day. For disability, a number of disability cases received has remained about the same in the first quarter of 2021 as last year. In March, we received 282 applications, and our turnaround time from receipt to completion was 20.1 days. The goal is 25 days. To note as well, this week we actually lost one of the physicians on the medical board, so we'll be working on recruiting to fill that position. Of course, we'll require approval from the Board of Trustees once we have that person screened and are able to present that individual to you. Refunds in March of 2020, we received 1,095 refund requests. And at that time, we had a 20.7 day turnaround time, slightly above the 20-day turnaround time. If you were here last time, you heard me speak at that not meeting that goal last year. So we cross-trained some individuals and to ensure that we were going to get those paid on time rate at goal or better. So in March of 2021, because of that, we actually had 1,140 refund requests, and our turnaround time was down to 7.9 days. For payroll processing in March, we had 338,796 retirees paid, 557,222,386. That doesn't include our 4 monthly supplemental runs, which include refunds, but that's just to note that for you guys. For refunds, we actually have a refunds online project in the works. That's continuing, and the target completion date is sometime around the fourth quarter. As part of that, we're implementing an identity authentication piece, and that's includes PII, personally identifying information from an individual, such as Social Security number, and things that only that person should know. However, because of identity theft, we've recognized that other questions called public information are also critical in ensuring the prevention of fraud. So this authentication piece will actually have a combination of questions that are both public and PII. With that association with the refunds online, depending on the success, we hope to attach that to some other online self-services.
Have you looked at two-step authentication?
We do two-step authentication as well for login and for anything that you want to change, such as right now the beneficiary and tax information as well as direct deposit.
So those questions are over and above.
That's correct. So over the last 12 months for self-service, over the last 12 months, we provided over 1.3 million retirement estimates in self-service. That could be somebody hitting the site more than one time, but it's over 1.3 million hits on estimates for retirement, which is sizable. Over the last 12 months, also, we've had over 300,000 beneficiary updates for our active employees. And over that same period, we've also had over 8,500 retirees go in and change their addresses. They don't have to send the paperwork in. There's no delays. It's effective immediately. It hits our line of business orbit system internally as soon as they transact. And then over the last 12 months, we also have provided nearly 79,000 service purchase estimates in self-service. We're seeing a lot of activity in self-service right now, particularly as it relates to the retirement estimates. And that's all I have. If anyone has any questions.
Questions of Rick? I'll just add, as someone who's in the building all the time, and I see Rick all the time, that it's been probably the most difficult year in the history of being in the check delivery business for lots of different reasons. Starting with the fact that the volume of retirements is up, and as you've heard, the volumes of deaths are up. And this is critically important because when someone passes away, they have a service. The people who provide that service expect to get paid. And it really just does become that basic in some respects. So, Rick, thank you for all you're doing. And when you make mistakes, you're always willing to disclose them. And you don't make us discover them, which is a big part of the culture of OS, Office of State Treasurer. And you're constantly focused on figuring out what's right, getting it right, and keeping it right. So thank you all. Thank you and your staff, obviously. With that, we're going to delay on the actuarial joy for a moment and go to Sam Watts, because Sam is in the legislative building and he's going to be unavailable as we have some bills being presented in a few minutes. And Sam, are you ready?
Yes, sir. Can you guys hear me okay?
Wonderfully. We can hear you better now than we can when you're in here.
I'll take that as a bit of legislative joy. Really just wanted to hit the high points on retirement legislation that we're working on with the General Assembly that was recommended by the department. Our number one priority for retirement is always funding the actuarially determined employer contribution. I've been in contact with the appropriations chairs this week on that topic. We do think we're in solid shape again to continue to fund the retirement system properly. There was a few questions last week, but I think we were able to get those answered and are moving forward correctly. The other thing, and this is rather exciting as it's unfolding as we are here today, the Senator Jim Bergen filed a bill that would hopefully reduce the amount of pension spiking litigation between the retirement system and school boards across the state. We currently have about 36 active pending cases with school boards on pension spiking, and it's probably $7 million that we're trying to make sure that we get into the retirement system to keep us fully funded from that, just from those lawsuits. And the senator wanted us to try to work with the school board association to see if there were things that we could agree to or agree with that would maintain the funding integrity of the system, but reduce the friction that we're feeling from the school systems on complying with the pension spiking law. And so we came to a number of issues that will be presented today on that front. And they're also going to do a litigation pause. There will be no new lawsuits filed against the retirement if this bill passes, and no new lawsuits filed in the next year on this topic from school boards. And we'll have a working group trying to coordinate to see what we can do to continue to reduce the friction. And so we're grateful that the Senate gave us the opportunity to work with everyone, and we hope to move through that one, and that it's a successful effort as we continue to proceed through the legislative session. The other rather large policy issue we're working on is part 2 of the rewrite of the service purchase statutes. After 80 some years of retirement legislation, we had about 88 service purchase provisions where people could buy into the retirement system, and there were varying rules and varying formulas and varying restrictions on each of those. And so we set out to define what a standard service purchase would look like, and then try to bring all the various ones into line. And we figured out it would take us about 3 years of legislative work and several years of programming. And we wanted to pace things out so that we didn't overwhelm the staff that work on that part of the topic, part of the system. And so we're on part 2 of that, and it seems to be going along swimmingly with the legislature this year on that one. And then we have a number of technical and administrative changes, and then we're monitoring everything else that affects the system in the General Assembly. I'm happy to take questions, Mr. Chair, if you would like to have any questions directed on this topic.
Questions of Sam? Sam, thank you for that update, and I can tell you that Sam is a valuable part of this team. You may not see them, but I think he has some of those little roller blades in his tennis in his shoes that he scoots around the General Assembly with, because he seems to be everywhere at once. I will also tell you that, finding a bill sponsor is not as easy as it sounds. Getting a bill drafted is not as easy as it sounds. Getting one scheduled in a committee is not as easy as it sounds. Getting it out of committee, getting it serially referred, getting it through the rules of the House or the Senate, getting it on the floor and into the other chamber, where you have to do everything I just said almost again. None of that's easy. And so, Sam, we appreciate the work you're doing down there, especially these bill sponsors who get what we're trying to do here, which is to protect, preserve, and strengthen this plan for the next generation of public service workers. That's all it's about. And I will add to that, in the last election cycle, we lost some key advocates for our causes who have in many instances have carried our water as bill sponsors. And as you know, there was a big turnover in the General Assembly this year for retirement and other reasons. And we're very grateful to have picked up some new team members to help us carry these types of bills into the future. And lastly, I'll say that, once something comes out of bill drafting, it gets introduced, it sometimes needs tweaks done to it. We have a philosophy that when we're working with another association who may have a different things than we do, once there's an agreement on something, we don't change a period or a comma without their signing off on it. That's how we partner with people. We may never come to an agreement on anything, but once we arrive at an agreement, we don't change a period or a comma without the other party signing off on that again. We don't make unilateral changes. And I think having that reputation helps us in the long run. So, Sam, thank you. And any other members on the phone have any questions? Okay. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, sir.
Next, we'll go to Vicki.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So before we jump into the slides, I just want to remind everyone that Member Services is made up of our retirement benefit education counselors who educate on retirement through webinars and in writing. We also have our retirement benefit counselors who are over the phone, and they also help with written inquiries that come in. We also have constituent services counselors, and they handled high-level inquiries sent outside of our normal delivery channels. We have a workforce manager who assists with scheduling, forecasting, project, and equipment management, and they also work with IT to test and manage MS tickets. And we have our learning and development department. Of course, we have staff developers and quality coaches, and they train and coach existing staff as well as ongoing staff on an ongoing basis. So today, we'll look at our counseling and training activities over the last quarter. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that this is the production of our correspondence coming through the department. On the left of the graph, that represents how many, and on the right, it represents the timing in days. So if you look at the numbers for this past quarter, that's January, February, and March, you'll see that we had over 18,000 letters to process, and we were able to do that in 5.7 days. Now, looking back at the first quarter of last year, we see that our first big spike was in March of 2020 when we received over 6,000 letters in 1 month, and we totaled for that quarter about 15,000. Then if you look back to 2019, we received about 8,000 letters. So that's a big difference. We've gone from 8,000 in 2019 to 15,000 in 2020 and now 18,000 in 2021. So just as a side note, since it seems we're trending upwards each year in receiving written inquiries, we've added cross-training all of our member service counselors in responding to written correspondence. That's part of our strategic plan. And that way we can ensure no matter what happens in the future, we'll be able to assist more efficiently. So if you look at the next slide, it gives you a snapshot of our virtual retirement education meetings. And so far, you'll see our fiscal year, which is July 2020 through March 2021, we've held a total of about 130. And then we also show this information in the pie chart to the left, for those of you who like that type of chart. And the table, of course, is to the right. We continue to see our attendance grow for these presentations. Of course, lots of people are interested in retiring. It's becoming more and more popular, and we've increased our number of presentations we offer. We now offer about 6 per week. Plus, we have an employer training class each month. So it brings us to about 25 presentations a month. So far this year, we've conducted, like I said, about 130, and we've been able to educate over 7,100 members and 400 employers, or a little over 400 employers. We had a really great quarter with record attendance this past quarter. For example, in February, we had over 500 attendees for our community college presentations. And in March, we had our Northeastern Conference tour via webinar, and we had over 300 attendees. And then we had over 130 Wake County HR staff members attend our April 13th presentation. So we continue to have a great participation in our employer training. And we just really are focusing on making sure that our employers have more up-to-date information on topics regarding retirement. And so far, we've gotten really great feedback on that. And then if you go to the next slide, this slide is actually going to go over our one-on-one retirement counseling sessions. And again, with everyone interested in retirement right now because of our July retirement season, you'll see that they've increased. If you look to the left of this chart, you'll see our counseling sessions are represented by each horizontal line that goes across the table, and the red bars show how many appointments we actually had each month. For example, if you look at January, you see we had a little over 250 appointments, And if you were to hover over that bar, you'd see that it's like 262 is the actual number, which is basically the average that we did per month for this quarter. So the volume for scheduling one-on-one appointments during the July retirement season was about the same as last year. We're counseling about 800 members, and we're just helping them process and helping them understand what benefits they have. We go over a checklist, we look at their estimates and all of that before July retirement. And if you go to the next slide, this is going to go over our monthly email production. And to the left of this graph, it shows the number of emails received, and the right shows the turnaround time to respond to those emails in days. So for our past quarter, January through March, we responded to over 16,000 emails. That's averaging well over 5,500 a month, 5,500 a month. With our email volume continuing to rise, especially during this peak season, our member service counselors, they continue to work together by focusing mostly on our calls during the day and working emails before and after their scheduled shifts to make sure that we're responding to all members as soon as possible. And the strategy worked because we ended up with an average of 2-day turnaround time for the quarter. So let's see, let's go to the next slide. And this slide's going to go over our average speed of answer. If you look on the left, you'll see the time represented in minutes and seconds. And though we'd love to always keep our average speed of answer under 5 minutes, it's nearly impossible during this peak period because we don't have the staff, and we don't even have the space to house the staff if we had them. So we just do a bunch of other things to try to help as much as we can. And for example, we had all member service counselors taking phone calls. That's the ERG counselors as well as our normal counselors who are on the phone. And we were able to get an average speed of answer of 9 minutes. It's not what we wanted, but of course it wasn't 9 minutes every time someone called. It's just there were some days that, like around pay periods, that it was really, really high and there was a longer wait time. But it averaged out to about 9 minutes. And knowing that this is going to be the case from our experience in past years, we do our very best to get as much information out to our members as possible so they really don't have to wait if they don't want to. For example, our communications manager sent out a retiree newsletter that includes frequently asked questions for whatever's happening at the time. We keep our employers in the know with an ongoing employer newsletter. We update our voice response system with pay dates, how to find deduction details in Orbit, how to get their 1099-Rs right up front in the menu. We create quick and helpful videos and we add them to our website, and we make sure our question and answers are updated on our website. We communicate information through social media. So Christy, our communication manager, she finds out what the calls are about, and then she puts information out on social media, hoping that people will go there instead of waiting on the phone. And some exciting news is that our communications manager, Christy, is working on our employer toolkit so that we have a single point of reference for our partners and our employers. And we're going to be sending updates soon as it's available, but that's coming very, very, very soon. And then our last slide shows our call volume and our abandonment rate for the quarter. So the call volume is represented by the blue bars, and our abandonment rate is the red line. You can clearly see that even with all of our member service counselors pitching in and taking calls, it's just not enough. The graph shows that we received over 69,000 calls. That's about 11,000 more than we received last quarter. And out of those members calling in, 17% of them hung up before we could get to them. Now we're hoping, of course, that all of our preparation before we got so busy made a difference and they got the information they needed, or they called back, or they emailed. I can guarantee if they called in and it was busy, they also emailed us. That's what we're finding. They'll call. If they can't get an answer, they email, and then they call back, and then they call the treasurer's line. And then we reach out and get back to them. So hopefully they got what they needed. And then our call drivers during this quarter, they're mostly tax related. They're related to death, refund requests, statements of income, and people needing assistance with self-service. So thank you, heard Rick talking about self-service. Well, a lot of those people can't get in because they don't remember their passwords, or it's been so long, so they call us and we try to help them get into self-service. So we got a lot of phone calls on that. And then currently, if we jump toward April, we're following our typical pattern around this time of year. Every year, we start shifting from tax-related inquiries to calls regarding our July retirement season. So people are calling to get ask questions about retirement eligibility, how to use unused sick leave for retirement, and seeking assistance with retirement online and self-service. And most of our calls are from teachers because their school year is almost over. And then a lot of the calls are about their estimates, trying to figure out if they should retire now or keep working. Some are canceling the retirement plans and continue to work longer due to the pandemic or just because they need to help. They know that help's needed, so they're deciding to work longer. And then I have another really exciting thing to share, communications. This is Christy again. Mars is coming to orbit soon. And if you don't know what Mars is, it is my annual retirement statement. And it's the annual retirement statement that we used to have called the MRS, and now we're calling it Mars. And it will be in orbit in mid-May for active members with complete error-free data and 1 calendar year of service and contributions for the year ending 12/31/2020. It will focus on the foundation of retirement, the pension benefit, and they'll be able to see their personal info like their address, phone number, email, the retirement system in which they've been a member of, their principal beneficiaries, their estimated potential retirement benefit, and they will have links to their supplemental retirement plans website and to their My Social Security so that members can create an account and then receive a real-time estimate based on their work history and contributions. So that's coming really soon. We've already started those communications. And that's all from me. Does anyone have questions for me?
Questions for Vicki?
This is Greg Patterson. I'll just make a quick comment, Vicki. Everything you state, even though I know you want to bring down the wait times, et cetera, from my personal experience, having recently dealt with 2 other large state agencies that will go unnamed, a 9-minute hold time sounds wonderful. One of the other state agencies, after going through a phone tree that took about 5 minutes, a recording plays that states they're no longer accepting phone calls at this time. So compared to some of your peers and other agencies, you're doing a marvelous job.
Thank you so much. I'll make sure to pass that along to my staff. That'll make them feel really good.
Thank you, Greg. Any other questions or comments? Vicki, if my memory's correct, didn't we call an audible about 7 or 8 weeks ago that greatly cut down on call times? I just can't quite put my head around what that was. We made some little adjustment in something that made all the call times go down. Do you remember what that could have been, or am I just imagining that?
I know that we added stuff to our voice response system, and I know we have a tool called Callback Assist. So when people call in, it gives them the opportunity to call up. We'll call them back when they're next in line, or they can make an appointment. Other than that, I'm not sure, other than all the things I just went over. You know, we add stuff to social media. That helps greatly. Christy has just been wonderful in helping us try to get messages out to our staff or to our members.
Vicki, this is Tom. Didn't you, you also had a shift where you actually mentioned it a little bit earlier with the counselors that normally would be seeing visitors and doing the email and correspondence, where they were helping a lot more on the phones on your busy days like Mondays, and then folks were pitching in later instead of answering emails, they were on the phone, and then you switched folks to helping on the emails later in the week, so that
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, you actually brought the email turnaround time down, as we saw in the charts, and brought the call times down, even with the higher volume that we just saw this last month. You're able to improve on both of those by just that little shift that you guys did. Has helped tremendously.
Oh, thank you. Yes, we did. All of our member service counselors are helping with calls, especially the rule is if there's 15 to 20 calls in queue, we add everyone, including the team leads, just everyone goes on the phone. And then if we need to work overtime, we just beg Tom and we try to get that done, but we don't take that for granted. We try to keep that as low as possible, but right now it's kind of impossible because we've got to do some of that before and after. But yeah, and we had a couple people who have resigned because they found promotions, but they are still working a part-time temporary employee to help us with emails. So that's really helping as well. So yeah, we're looking at every avenue we can to keep our responses down to a minimum. We know that the longer we take in answering, the more times they're going to email or call. So it just defeats the purpose and creates this vicious cycle. So we're just doing everything we can.
Thank you. That's what I was thinking of. So thank you very much. And
Thank you.
just for the board members and staff, we are reopening OST. We've been open for a number of months. Many have been here for a whole year, and but we're reopening OST next Monday. So a lot of any increased efficiencies that may come from people actually being back in the building, I think we'll start seeing the benefit of that also. And we're doing this in a clean, safe, and compliant way. So, Vicki, I know that affects the call center greatly. So, we'll next go to our actuarial joy part of the agenda, and Patrick Kinlaw, and maybe to take a little spin off the joy. Just this morning, Pensions and Investment magazine came out, and there's a whole article in here about a federal probe and federal investigation has been launched into the Pennsylvania Public Employees Retirement System after there was an error reported in their investment performance. This is a $64 billion plan. Ours is a $118 billion plan. And
please enjoy this music while we connect you to the next available agent.
DM, if you don't mute that.
Yeah, caller 23. I don't know who that is.
It's all about the money.
That was just some easy, smooth listening to break up.
You're not gonna get your bottle of water if you don't mute.
It's a nice segue. The segue to you.
Can everybody hear us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Yes, I hear you.
And before I hand it off to Patrick, these are very serious matters when federal government descends on the treasurer's office and starts collecting records and computers and things. And so I say all that in that I know we kind of kid about actuarial joy, but these reports that Patrick gives and the compliance that has to go into this plan that affects 1 out of 10 adult North Carolinians. It's serious damn business. And so I know some of this kind of get a little bit dry from time to time about these actuarial reports, but there's no better place that we always have to be diligent about figuring out what's right, getting it right, and keeping it right. And making sure that we always are conservative in anything that we report. So this happened in Pennsylvania, and the spokesperson who was responsible for doing the work ironically declined to comment. So, which is not something we do here either. We make a mistake, we own up to it, and then we comment about it. So, anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Patrick Kinlaw, Director of Policy Planning and Compliance for the Retirement Systems. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, members of the board. It's nice to see you here and for those on the phone. Our policy planning and compliance team works to ensure the financial integrity and long-term health of the retirement systems. On page 18, you can see a 13-month history of the collections toward overpayments. Overpayments are amounts that are paid out by the retirement systems where it is later determined that the money needs to be repaid to the systems. The horizontal line across the middle represents the monthly rate that would be needed to meet the goal of $10 million in collections for a year. Actual collections for the last 12 months were approximately $9.6 million. As of the end of March, the total outstanding amount of identified overpayments was approximately $36.9 million. That is gradually being recovered. One of the compliance section's responsibilities is to administer invoices when retirement benefits exceed the contribution-based benefit cap, or CBBC. That's on the next page, page 19. This results from what's commonly known as the anti-pension spiking law. Page 19 shows the cumulative invoice activity since 2015. As you can see, since that year, the retirement systems have issued invoices related to 385 separate retirements in total, averaging about 60 per year. During that time, the retirement systems have invoiced more than $37 million and have collected nearly $30 million of that. During the past quarter, staff have been busy completing the annual preparation and review of plan member information that will be provided to the consulting actuaries from Kavanaugh McDonald so that they can complete their annual work. The valuations conducted this year will be the 4th year of valuations conducted by Kavanaugh McDonald under their contract. The contract allows that the department could, at its election, extend the contract for one additional year, which would be calendar year 2022. And as is a normal process during the regular life of the contract, the department is thoughtfully evaluating the alternatives regarding the consulting actuaries engagement for 2022 and beyond. Finally, an item is attached to the board materials. That is a report from the actuarial firm Gabriel Roeder Smith, or GRS. The Office of the State Auditor engaged GRS to conduct a review of the actuarial assumptions, methods, processes, and calculations performed by Kavanaugh McDonald for the retirement systems, and those performed by Siegel Consulting for the Retiree Health Benefit Trust. Phase 1 of their report was provided to the boards in January 2021, and Phase 2, which was completed last month, is being provided today. Phase 2 is GRS's review of calculations where the actuaries allocate certain accounting results to all the various employing units who participate in the systems. And although the reports were prepared for the Office of the State Auditor, not our office, we were pleased to see that GRS found the assumptions and methods were all reasonable, and they found that the work was prepared in accordance with government accounting standards and actuarial standards of practice. That concludes my remarks.
Any questions? Thank you, Patrick. And Patrick will have other things to say further in the agenda. Now we'll call on Greg Patterson, who will give the TSERS and LGERS board an IAC update.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. I just have some brief comments or a brief update this morning. The Investment Advisory Committee met on February 24th. We started the meeting, as we typically do, with an update on the Treasurer's initiative for cost savings. The original goal was $100 million over a 4-year period. We now have exceeded $350 million of cost savings. So just a terrific job by staff. When we met in February at that time, the total assets under management through the Treasurer's office was right at $156 billion. The retirement system had an increase in the 4th quarter of 2020 of just over $7.5 billion. We then had a presentation by strategists on it was an economic review. The 4 primary topics discussed, and no surprises here about events in 2020. We discussed the recession, the pandemic, social unrest, and the elections, and how all that might impact our portfolio and the economy as a whole. We then had a report that was prepared by Aon. Aon did a operational and governance review of the retirement system. For the most part, the retirement system received very high marks. There are some minor changes that have been suggested on shifting some staff responsibilities in segregating duties within operations and portfolio management. And with that, that concludes my report, and I'm glad to answer any questions.
Yes, sir. Jeff?
A quick question in layman's terms. Has our performance been level or exceeded expectations during that period? Because we hear reports on news that investors have really done well during the last year, even though the pandemic was in place. How did our fund do based on the reports we're hearing in the news about the success or growth of our plan?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'm looking at one of the handouts from the meeting on February 24th, and it's a comparison of our portfolio's net returns, net meaning after all expenses are taken into account, and compares that to benchmarks. And we have exceeded the benchmark in the 3-month, 12-month, 3-year, 5-year, and 10-year returns. So the folks managing the portfolio have done an excellent job in meeting or exceeding the benchmarks. And if someone from the investment team is on the phone or in the meeting, I'll turn it over to them to add any additional commentary on that for that question.
Thank you, Greg. I'll just add, Jeff, and if anybody else wants to go behind, that's fine. If you look at the last 50 years of this plan, there is a quadrant chart that shows risk and reward. And basically for the last 50 years, we've always been in the top left of that, maybe one of the only plans in the universe that's in that top left. And what that dot will show you is that when stocks crash, which they did between St. Patrick's Day and July 4th last year, we do far better than anyone else. I mean, the potential of the billions of dollars of losses this plan could have incurred between St. Patrick's and July 4th of last year are enormous. But when the stocks blow out the upside, we lag. We lag when the stocks really go down, and we lag when they go up. It's just an example of how the plan's been managed. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't can't predict the future. I will also add to that that as far as the plan itself is concerned, that it's at 118 billion today, at an all-time level. And for those board members either that are joining us remotely, it's always important to know that it's not just what the value was. For example, four years ago, the value then was $89 billion. It's what it is today, less what it was then, plus all the money that's been paid out. And the gross amount that's been paid out of the last 4 years, $27 billion, on top of the fact that the plan is up to $28 billion. So that's just one of the, and that's what gave us a little bit of the flexibility that this board took recently to lower the assumed return because of how well it's done. And I would just finally say to that, as far as the investment management and Greg's excellent report, we're always looking for things that bring value to this plan. And when you look at another one of our reports, it will show that in the percentile world, that we're in the best possible percentile in terms of risk, and which never happens. We're ironically one of the best percentiles in terms of return. Normally, those two things are opposites. So I'm very proud of that. And thank you for the question. And if anybody else on the call would like to opine on that, feel free to do so. But these are very important things, because ultimately, when we're paying out $550 million every 30 days gross out of this plan, and the fact is that the plan has crossed the precipice. I've said this before, but I hope you internalize it. It's crossed the precipice paying into the plan than are not. First time in state history. It's the thing we have heard about all of our lives with Social Security. Our grandparents, it was 1,000 to 1. There was 1,000 people paying into the Social Security for every one drawing. It went to 500 to 1, then 100 to 1. Now it's 2 to 1. So that's happening with the state retirement system. Not to that degree, but it just goes to show you that there's benefits can only be paid if employees contribute. Now there's less employees contributing than are not. If the assumed rate of, if the actuarial funding ratios, dollars are appropriated by local government and state general assembly, and then the investment gains. That's the only three things that can make this thing work. So I took too long to explain this, but I think it was helpful.
Mr. Treasurer, I do appreciate that information and the report. And I think all North Carolinians, and especially the state and local government employees, appreciate the professional standards that this office, how competent it is. Thank you.
Thank you. And as I've said, I'm standing on the shoulders of all the previous treasurers. And by the way, Harlan Bowles' son will be in the today. I saw Treasurer Richard Moore yesterday. Your co-chief investment officer, Treasurer Bowles, Treasurer Moore, Treasurer Cowell, now Treasurer Falwell. So there's been a lot of continuity, a lot of culture. And I'm standing on the shoulders of previous treasurers who have never pretended to have a crystal ball either, as well as the hardworking folks in the investment management division.
Just a quick interruption.
Mr. Treasurer, this is Greg Patterson. I need to make one correction. It's accurate to state that we exceeded the benchmark for the 12-month, 3-year, 5-year, and 10-year. I misspoke. We were slightly under the benchmark for the 3-month period.
Which happens.
This is Linda Gunner. I'd like to ask a question. Greg, when you were referring to this, comparison of North Carolina with, I guess, other states, is that in the minutes, or like if we went on to the investment board, advisory committee, could we obtain that report and download it? Because I think this is really great. I mean, everything that we've done with the retirement system, and I think that I'd like to share information when I'm talking to people.
Linda, I would say
I'm going to have to.
Linda, I think it is. I think it is there. If it's not there, it'll be there by close of business today. But my hunch is it is there. And Linda,
okay.
And I also want to add that our big battle right now is to make sure this plan stays fully funded by the General Assembly. So the state health plan.
That's right.
This pension plan. Thank you. Thank you,
Greg.
Well, I appreciate everything you're doing.
Greg, this is Tom. I think we're getting an echo off your phone for some reason, your connection.
I'll go back on mute. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Greg. It's always good to see you. Now we'll go to Tom Causey on our supplemental retirement insurance.
Okay. So this is item 8. Included in your materials is a required annual report to the Board of Trustees on the voluntary supplemental insurance offerings for retirees, which has been it's been brokered since 2011 by Pierce Insurance based in Farmville. Report's probably familiar. It's one we've been using for years, same format. The benefits include dental and vision coverage through United Healthcare, as well as identity theft coverage through LifeLock, for which all costs for administering these benefits are covered by the participants. The report provides information on open enrollment numbers, the number of participants as of December 2020, as well as the cost of various benefits. The number of participants in the dental and vision plans has about doubled since 2011 when Pierce took over, with over 125,000 receiving dental coverage and 105,000 with vision coverage. And there are currently over 21,000 participating in LifeLock. The numbers are not really surprising, as the rates are very competitive and our retirees get great service from Pierce. And rarely do we ever get complaints about the services that are offered. I think it's rare to hear anything from Vicky's team on problems. And if there is, Pierce quickly does resolve them for us. And just you might have seen in the report, as a reminder, in June 2020, there was a 50% reduction in the dental premiums for June because of reduction in the use of dental care in the beginning of the year, saving $2.3 million for our participants. And that's everything I have from the report.
Thank you, Tom. This is the treasurer again. Just to say that Tom talked about a few things there that need to be, attention needs to be drawn to as another example of the great job the staff does. Number one, the rebate. Last year, obviously, people could not go to the dentist. This is an insurance product. When you can't go to the dentist and people are paying premiums, that means the profit, the underwriting ratio to the company that's writing this policy went up dramatically. And I love that. Phone? Okay. So what we did is we negotiated with the insurance company and said that since your profit is higher, we remake that back to our members. If people can't go to the dentist, they're paying premiums to go to the dentist, they can't go to the dentist. And let's get this back to our members. And that's exactly what happened. Secondly, I think every year for the last 4 years, we've actually, as the number of enrollees in these plans have increased, we've actually reduced premiums every year, I think, for eye and dental every year for the last 4 years. Year over year declines. And I know that if you've been to the dentist at private pay, you know that the cost of going to the dentist is not declined in the last 4 years. So we're very proud of that and our relationship with Pierce. And lastly, and this goes back really to a Vicky and Rick question, there is a lot of complexity, especially with people my age and above, regarding all these types of plans. We have people who are on the Humana Medicare Advantage plan as retirees, and then somebody sends them a solicitation that says Humana, and they fill it out and they pay a premium. And when they already have these plans. So I know all this sounds simple to you and may not want to hear much about it, but we do have to unpack a lot of stuff where people double enroll and do this and do that. So thank you, Tom, and thank on behalf to advocate for all these folks in applying common sense to these issues, especially the supplemental plans. Okay. So we'll have to have a vote to accept the annual report on supplemental retiree insurance, and Jeffrey Winstead got boxed out a while ago, so I'd like to make a motion. Motion. Thank you. Do I hear a second from the state board?
Second, Linda Gunner.
Motion second being had. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Dale Falwell.
Aye.
Barbara Gibson.
Aye.
Dirk German.
Aye.
Greg Patterson.
Aye.
John Ebbinghausen. Aye. Joshua Smith.
Aye.
Lance Brewer.
Aye.
Margaret Reeder.
Aye.
And Oliver Holly.
Aye. Thank you. I'd like motion from LGERS. So moved. Homer Dearman. Thank you, Homer. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. Motion second. Any further discussion? Not, clerk call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Ellen Wansey.
Aye.
Brenda Howerton.
Aye.
Clea Atkinson. Clea, you might be on mute. I don't hear Clea. Greg Patterson.
Aye.
Kevin Gordon. Kevin Gordon. I don't hear you either, Kevin. Lance Brewer.
Aye.
Melody Brady.
Aye.
Tony Brown.
Aye.
And Vernon Gammon. Oh, Vernon's not with us.
All right. Thank you, members. Now we're on to item 9.
Question,
Sorry.
my name wasn't called.
Oh, you second.
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry, I apologize.
All right. We'll call your name. Somebody was calling you a while ago.
I know.
I love the ringtone, by the way. A little bit jealous there. Now on to item number 9, inactive employers.
Good morning. This is Patrick Tinlaw, Director of Policy Planning and Compliance.
This is inactive employers.
Inactive employers, yes.
So in the moment, at the end, we'll talk about a little bit about employees.
In June of 2020, the General Assembly enacted Session Law 2020-48, which officially creates a category of employer in the retirement system called an inactive employer. An inactive employer is one who, for at least a month, has not had any employees who qualify for membership in the retirement system. In order to be classified as inactive, the employer must apply and obtain approval from the retirement systems division. Upon once again employing individuals who qualify for membership, they are no longer inactive employers. The same law required that staff report to the boards by April 30th of each year on any employers designated as inactive during the previous calendar year. The 2 reports before you are those reports. For the state system, no employers were designated as inactive during calendar year 2020, and staff was not aware of any as of the end of 2020 who may qualify. For the local system, no employers were designated as inactive during calendar year 2020, but staff has identified several employers who may meet the criteria to be designated as inactive during 2021, in which case they would appear in a similar report prepared next year. And we're working with that group of employers to make sure they're aware of the alternative that exists for them. And that concludes my presentation.
Any questions? Okay. We need to have a motion from the state board to accept the Kinlaw's report about inactive employers in compliance with General Statute 135. TSERS. Motion from a teacher's board member. Thank you, Jeffrey. Motion second.
Second. Lance Brewer.
Lance. Any further discussion? We're sweating a little bit, weren't you, Patrick?
I'm okay now.
My world, 30
wondering what the
seconds and not
controversy-
getting the motion is like an eternity.
I was wondering what the controversy might be.
All right. Any further discussion? If not, Parker, call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Barbara Gibson.
Aye.
Kirk German.
Aye.
Greg Patterson.
Aye.
John Ibickhausen.
Aye.
Joshua Smith.
Aye.
Linda Gunter.
Aye.
Margaret Reeder.
Aye.
Oliver Holly.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you very much. And I'd like motion from the LGERS board, please. So moved.
So
Greg
moved.
Patterson, so moved.
Second, Brenda Howerton.
Thank you. Motion is second. Any further discussion? If not, Parker, call the roll.
I have a motion from Homer and a second by Brenda. Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Ellen Bonsey.
Aye.
Clee Atkinson. I don't hear Clee. Greg Patterson.
Aye.
Jeffrey Morse.
Aye.
Kevin Gordon. I don't hear Kevin. Lance Brewer.
Aye.
Melody Brady.
Aye.
Tony Brown.
Aye.
Thank you. Now, a few minutes behind schedule, but we'll try to catch up. Now we're at item number 10 on the agenda, funding policy updates.
Good morning, this is Patrick Kinlaw again. This agenda item falls under the state system portion of the agenda. There is a similar item, number 13, under the local system portion. And I'll be talking at the beginning here about some items that pertain to both of those agenda items, so that when we get to item 13, we'll already have covered some of it. For your reference, the first document I'll plan to speak about is item 10D, as in Delta, attached to board materials, and I'll be starting on page 5 when we get to that one. I'd also like to make sure that it's clear at the outset that I am an actuary, but I am not the board's consulting actuary. The proposals before you today were developed by staff with input from the consulting actuary, and the consulting actuary is participating on the call if you have any questions for them. As background, 4 of the retirement systems have what are called stabilization, in addition to the regular actuarial assumptions and methods. And 2 of those systems are under the purview of the state board. That's the state system, or TSERS, and the National Guard Pension Fund. 2 of them are under the purview of the local board, which is the local system, or LGERS, and the Firefighters and Rescue Squad Workers Pension Fund. The stabilization policies for the National Guard and the Fire and Rescue Funds, sometimes we call by the acronym SCRSP, which we pronounce SCRISP, stands for State Contribution Rate Stabilization Policy. And for the state system and the local system, we have an acronym called ECRISP, Employer Contribution Rate Stabilization Policy. The difference there is only that in the state and local systems, it's the many government employers that contribute to the food of the state directly.
This is Tom. Could those on the phone or
just wanted to back on anything. I had one more thing to say in addition to
someone who's not
the importance of signing this MOA at the state level. And I know that Swain is going to mention this, so I just wanted to provide context. North Carolina, as Kevin mentioned.
So when we get back to Brenda, we'll have to
unmute her eventually. You can tell her she can still hear you. You can make sure she knows.
These stabilization policies serve a very important purpose. Without them, the actuaries would calculate a recommended contribution amount every year, but that contribution amount might go up and down a lot. And the stabilization policies that have been in place are meant to be there for a limited time, like 5 years, and they're providing more stability. They help to avoid, in particular, a V shape or a W shape, which is even worse, 2 Vs, in the required contribution rate, which is a very difficult pattern for budgeters and funders to deal with. So by having these stabilization policies in place, you can make sure that the decisions that are made and the incentives that are created around the funding and budgeting of the systems are in the best interest of the retirement system over the long term. So in these policies, the boards would set a strategy for recommended contributions over the next...
I'm sorry, Patrick, what page are we on?
I'm sorry, we're on... in a minute, I'll be talking about item 10D, as in Delta, which is the TSERS presentation. It's the landscape format presentation for the state system. That's right, and I'll be on page 5 of that one.
Like Taco Bell, it really does matter. No matter what you order, it's put it together the same way.
Yes, I'd like the number 5. All of the policies, all 4 of them that we're talking about today, are scheduled to expire effective June 2022, a little over a year from now. And today, staff is presenting proposed versions of all 4 of them that the boards could adopt today. And they're intended to cover the 5 years, the 5 fiscal years ending 2023 through 2027. And that would be the timing that would allow them to be revised once the actuaries have conducted their next study of assumptions, which is going to occur in calendar year 2026. So before we get into a few specifics of each policy, there's some things that all 4 of them have in common. They all put the policies into a similar policy document format if they were not in one before. So those are the ones attached in your meeting materials as 10A as in alpha, 10C as in Charlie, and 13A and 13C. I'll be describing maybe a little bit about those documents this morning, but for purposes of following along, I'll be taking you through the higher level summaries, which are in the landscape format, which are items 10 and 13, ending in B as in Baker and D as in Delta. The proposed policies and other things they have in common are that they're all adding definitions of certain terms. They've all been updated to refer to statutory provisions enacted since the previous versions, and they have all been updated to address practical questions that staff has encountered over the last 5 years or so as we have administered the previous versions, such as how to adjust numbers from an old report when there have been events that have happened in the meantime. And finally, while still describing the policies in general, 2 of them, for the National Guard Fund and the Fire and Rescue Fund on the local side, they go beyond funding recommendations per se, and they talk about the conditions under which the board would consider recommending benefit improvements, or COLAs. That is not part of the state and local system policies, because for those systems, they're separate decisions under statute. But for the National Guard and Fire and Rescue, both of the funding policies call right now for any recommended benefit improvements to be fully funded in a single year. And the proposals before you today would keep that idea for those 2 funds, but they do clarify what exactly it means to fully fund a benefit improvement within 1 year. And in order to do that, we've created a new acronym because we always are looking for opportunities to do that, called the Benefit Improvement Funding Requirement, or BIFR. And that is the amount that would... Apologize. Object. That's going to be the amount that's calculated that's needed in order to fund any proposed benefit improvement in the upcoming year. We'll talk about that more in a moment. So I'll move on now to a few specifics under the state system and then the National Guard. For the state system, we're looking at item 10D as in Delta in the meeting materials. On page 5, the current policy that exists right now calls for contributions that are equal to the actuarially determined amount, which the abbreviation there is ADEC, or the contribution rate associated with the previous year's appropriation plus 35/100% of pay, whichever is greater. It can't be any more than the ADEC based on 30-year Treasury bond yields, which is currently a very, very large contribution rate that is not applying in practice right now. Staff is recommending, if you move to page 6, that we keep this kind of structure in place for the next 5 years, including the guaranteed increase of 35/100% of pay per year, and wanted to describe the main reason why. You have seen at your last meeting projections from the consulting actuary that show that the ADEX could remain level or decrease even over the next 5 years if all of the assumptions are met, including if the board can, if the retirement system can achieve 6.5% return in each and every year. But there's still a lot of risk in those requirements associated with capital markets and other variables. As the staff actuary, I've estimated that if the board just did away with the guaranteed 0.35% increase and just instead just contributed equal to the ADEC, that there would be a better than even chance of getting one of those V or W shapes in the next 3 to 5 years, which again is very challenging and difficult to deal with. And there would be a roughly 50-50 chance that at some point during the next 5 years, the state board would find itself asking for a year-over-year funding increase from the General Assembly of more than 1% of pay, which is more than $110 million from the general fund. Recurring. And it's more than $165 million from all funding sources. Just to get from 1 year to the next on a recurring basis and meet the actuary's recommendation. On the other hand, if the board's strategy includes keeping the 0.35% guaranteed increase in place, there's still a significant chance of that size of a year-over-year increment happening, but I estimate that the chance goes down to 20 to 30% instead of about 50%. Basically, providing the guaranteed increase up front limits the risk of much bigger incremental increases happening down the road. On page 7, The underlined terms describe the big items that are being maintained, clarified, defined, or updated in the proposed policy. And this material was circulated to the board about a week ago, and these provisions were highlighted. On page 8, we have a few numerical examples of how this policy would apply, and I'll just focus on the first two, although you're welcome to ask questions about the others as well. We're assuming in these examples that it is January of 2025, and the board is deciding what it's going to recommend to the General Assembly as the funding level for the state system in the fiscal year that will end in 2026. In every one of these scenarios or columns, you're going to take the greater of item 1 or 0.35% of pay greater than item 2. And the greater of those two will be the board's recommended funding level. But it cannot exceed item 3, which is the very large number right now that isn't really applying in practice. So in scenario 1, we have a straightforward situation where item 1, the ADEC from the actuary, is 18% of pay. And item 2, the previous year's recommendation was 17.5. So item 1 is greater than item 2 plus 0.35. And so item 1, which is 18%, would be the board's recommendation. In the second column, now you're dealing with the same thing from the actuary, a recommendation of 18%, but the previous year was 17.8. Well, now if you increase that 17.8 by 0.35, you have 18.15. So you're guaranteeing that you can recommend at least 0.35% of pay more than the previous year. That's 18.15, which is greater than what the actuary says is minimally required, 18%. And so the board's recommendation would be 18.15 in that scenario. Before moving on to the National Guard, I'd like to just stop here for any discussion. Okay. Moving to the National Guard, let's look at item 10B, as in Baker, from the meeting materials, starting on page 4 of that one. The current policy for the National Guard is for the board to recommend an appropriation equal to the greater of two numbers, similar to what we're talking about, except the details are a little different. The first of those two numbers is the amount that the board recommended for the current year. So basically, it cannot decline. The second of those two numbers is the actuary's recommendation, or ADEC, plus $2 million. And the $2 million would mean roughly a 1% improvement in funded percentage over and above the ADEC. Increases to benefits under the current policy were to be recommended only if they were fully funded in a single year and only if the increases were no greater than inflation. There was an exception that once the fund reaches 90% funded, the board would follow along on any COLA recommendation that it's making for TSERS, for the state system, and make an equivalent recommendation for the National Guard. On page 5, the proposed policy for the next 5 years would keep the current funding recommendation in place, which is the greater of the current amount or the ADEC plus $2 million. However, if the fund happens to reach 100% funded, first we'll have a big celebration, and then we'll change the amount of the funding recommendation to base it purely on the ADEC in that situation. If the fund is at least 100% funded, the board would just recommend that the General Assembly contribute whatever the actuary says is minimally required. On page 6, the follow-along COLA recommendation with TSERS, if the fund is at least 90% funded, would remain in place. And the board could also consider other benefit improvements, whether or not the funded percentage is at 90%, if the increase is no greater than inflation and if it's funded in a single year. Funded in a single year, the proposed policy clarifies what that means by using the PIFR, the new acronym that we talked about a minute ago. And there's a numerical example of that in a moment. On page 7, we have a couple of examples. Again, I'll just talk about the first two in brief of how the funding amount will be calculated if there was no benefit improvement being recommended. In all of these, we're assuming that the fund is not 100% funded yet. So you're comparing item 1 to the amount that is $2 million greater than item 2. In scenario 1, first column on the left, the board has recommended $11,031,715 as the current year appropriation. And that's not a random number. That's actually the amount that the board has recommended for the past several years. And the ADEC is $7 million. So the board would continue its recommendation at about $11 million in that case, because it's more than 7 million plus 2 million. And I'll skip over to the third column for the second example to talk about. Right now, this is at the right-hand column. Now the ADEC is $10 million. And so 10 million plus 2 million is greater now than the amount recommended in the previous year, 12 million. So the board would recommend 12 million. Moving to page 8, a few numerical examples of how the BIFR, this is if there is a benefit improvement recommendation, how much is needed to fund it. And without going through all of the numbers, basically the way this works is that the actuaries, the consulting actuaries will calculate how much the actuarial cost is of the benefit improvement, how much it costs to, in present value dollars, to provide this benefit on a prospective basis and also retrospectively if the suggestion calls for that. And that's the top row of this. That's the $2 million in these examples. In general, the BIFR is going to be equal to the $2 million. But if the fund is more than 100% funded, if there's a surplus, or if the board is asking the General Assembly for funding over and above what the actuary says is required in the upcoming year, then the board can reduce the amount needed to fund the benefit improvement and apply the extra funding toward the amount needed to fund the benefit improvement. So the idea of the BIFR is to allow the board and the General Assembly to take some credit if there's overfunding or anticipated overfunding in the plan in the upcoming year, to apply that toward a proposed benefit improvement. And that concludes my remarks on this particular item of the agenda, the TSERS and National Guard proposed funding policies.
Do we need a motion?
Want separate or on both?
I think it's all together, but there's a motion required, right?
Yeah, if the board wishes to approve the funding policy, then as it is, then we can go ahead and do motion.
Okay. We have a motion to approve the TSERS, ECRISP, and the National Guard SCRISP policies outlined in the tax policy document.
Dynamic Council makes a motion to approve it.
Thank you. John and others worked hard on the National Guard to get the funding level up. And do I hear a second? Jeffrey, thank you.
Second.
Discussion. Patrick, what's the funding level of the National Guard? Approximately.
Give you the exact number real quick. It is, as of the last valuation at the end of 2019, it was 88.1% funded.
Which is up dramatically.
Up dramatically. It was around 70% funded a few years ago.
It was the lowest funded of our plans, wasn't it?
That's correct. Now we're pushing to be the first one that's 100%.
Yeah, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk call a roll for teachers.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Barbara Gibson.
I'm going to abstain on this. Thank you. I'm going to abstain on this one.
Dirk German.
Aye.
Greg Patterson.
Aye.
Joshua Smith.
Aye.
Lance Brewer.
Aye.
Linda Gunter.
Aye. Aye.
Margaret Reeder.
Aye.
Oliver Holly.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Now we're on to our Kip Gaston proposed withdrawal from TSERS. Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kip Gaston, which is listed as Gaston College Preparatory Charter in TSERS records, joined TSERS as an employer in the year 2001. Kip Gaston has expressed their intention to withdraw from TSERS participation voluntarily, which a charter school may do. Part of the process of withdrawal involves payment of a withdrawal liability. The school would like to pay its withdrawal liability under a type of installment plan that's permitted by statute, as long as the Board of Trustees allows it. The installment plan is permitted as long as the withdrawal liability is at least $2 million. And in the case of Kip Gaston, the withdrawal liability is $5,276,641. I have to say that again, I apologize. $5,276,641. If the board approves the installment plan today, then Kip Gaston would be required to pay half of the withdrawal liability, or $2,638,821, within 90 days by July 28th of this year. The remaining half would be due in 36 monthly equal installments between August 2021 and July 2024. Statute provides that if the board approves payment as an installment plan, there will be a lien on the real property of the school in the favor of TSERS and the amount of the remaining amount owed until the withdrawal liability is paid in full. The statutory language regarding the lien is on page 2 of the memo in the board materials. If any payment is not paid within 90 days of the scheduled due date and TSERS is not able to recover the amount through enforcement of the lien, then the school will continue to be a participating employer, and they may be subject to late reporting penalties for the intervening period. Any charter school withdrawing from TSERS is also subject to the other provisions detailed in the memo, including the effect on employees' retirement benefits, their eligibility to collect benefits, a prohibition on rejoining TSERS as an employer for at least 5 years, and more. Staff has reviewed these provisions with the school, including the lien provisions and the detailed schedule of payments, and the school has confirmed in writing that they understand all of the applicable requirements. Staff recommends that the board approve a motion to approve the installment payment plan, creating a lien in favor of TSERS upon the real property of Kip Gaston as provided by statute.
Questions? When I was reading this earlier, the only thing I had was, as a charter school, do they own the property or are they leasing the property? In other words, we're only putting a lien against desks or whatever is inside. Do they actually own the physical building and land it sits on?
Yeah.
Yes, we're working with the school to identify all the real property that they own to which the lien would apply. And we're in the process of identifying that so that the lien can be filed in court.
Are there other liens on the property, or would they be superior to this?
I don't know if council may be able to answer that question.
Don't know at this point.
Or number 4 or 5 in line, it doesn't do us any good.
No good at all. That's the test question.
This is Kathy. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, the lien is
Hey, Kathy.
hey.
Kathy's been a great asset. Would you identify yourself and which division you're with?
Oh, sure. This is Kathy Murphy. I'm the DOJ attorney that represents the retirement system. And our lien here under the statute, the lien that the retirement system holds would have priority over all non-governmental liens. So, for example, I think if there were an IRS lien that got ahead of us, we would be second to that, but we would be ahead of any sort of typical mortgage type liens.
Great question, great answer. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
By the way, any other questions? And I'll say that these types of things come up from time to time. We try to be fair and just when we're dealing with these withdrawals from the system. This is not the first one we've done. It's not going to be the last one we've done. I will tell you that there's a lot that goes on to build these agendas and bring these presentations to you. There's a lot that goes on actuarially and operationally and legally. And I received a call about 4 weeks ago from a potential applicant to be in the system. And it was something that took a great amount of my time about 3 years ago, I guess, and which never happens. This person called me because I went and explained to them, if you get into this system, this is what we're looking at over the next 5 years in terms of your employer contribution rates. We're headed towards 16% of payroll. That time is like 11. And you just need to understand this. And this person called me, which once again never happens, to thank me. Because exactly what I said was going to happen has happened. And they don't know that they would have been able to fund their portion if they would have done what they initially wanted to do. So I was able to attend that meeting, present that information because of the work that legal, Kathy, Department of Justice, actuaries, and operationally gives me that information. But it's just an important thing for the board to know how much goes into these. And there's a lot of people who think they want to be in the plan and then decide not to be in the plan. Then there's some that in the KIPP charter school makes a decision they can no longer afford it, or they no longer want to be in the plan. So thank you. As I said earlier, we are fair and just about these. We don't pick and choose how we apply this law, and we don't pick and choose in terms of the installment process. We treat everybody equally.
Is there any interest with the installment plan? Are they charged interest, or is it in effect an interest-free plan?
No, sir, they are not. There's no interest on this installment, and that's part of the provision of statute.
And so anyway, thank you. All right. And just for my clarity, a person who works in that school who's a participant in this plan, I know they know this as far as future contributions coming out of their paycheck on their behalf. Are they just kind of like static? Are they frozen? And whatever they got, they have until they were to get back with another qualified employer?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. The employees of the school would, as of the complete withdrawal date, which would be today if the board approves the installment plan, the employees would stop earning any benefit under TSERS related to their future service or their future pay, as that might increase their average final compensation.
Right.
They would stop making contributions to the system. And then they could not receive their refund of their own contributions or a retirement benefit from TSERS until they actually stop working for the school and for any other employer under the retirement system.
Good answer. And then that led me to ask you one more question that I hope the rest of the board will find important if I can recall it, what I was going to ask you about. I'll think of it in a minute. So, okay. All right. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
before we have a motion, good morning. For a point of clarity, as working in education, we're very familiar with all of our educational partners, and then working in the East, I am familiar with KIPP. But the question I just want to double back to make sure I'm clear on, did I hear that the repayment of the portion that's needed, we go to the front of the line on any liens that are out there? Is that what I heard correctly?
Behind the IRS.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification.
Generally speaking, behind the IRS. And
gotcha.
I now have my question. Just when people are withdrawing from this system, it does not disallow them from being part of the 457. To be attached to the 401k, our defined contribution program, you have to be in the system, but they can still be attached to the 457, even if you're not part of LGERS.
In the local government system, that's correct. A local government employer could certainly qualifies to join the 457 could do so whether or not they're in the local government system.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, I'm not as familiar with how that applies to charter schools.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
I'm sorry, one more point of question. I promise I'm gonna be quiet. With the disbursement of us being behind the IRS, what is our liability that after the IRS takes what they need, that they are not able to pay the remaining balance back to the system? How does that work and where does that put us?
Mr. Hawley, thank you for that question. It's the situation that you're describing. Under statute, what would happen then if we're not able to recover the withdrawal liability? Then the statute provides that the employer never withdrew from the system. They thought they were withdrawing, but then they reached a point where they couldn't pay, and so therefore they never withdrew from the system, and that means their employees go back to, they still are entitled to the service and compensation and everything that they earn, and the employer still owes the contributions associated with that service, and they may have missed reporting, and they may be subject to late reporting penalties in the intervening period. That is the sort of fallback or ultimate position under statute if the amount isn't paid.
Okay. Any further questions?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Jeffrey?
Is there a situation such that bankruptcy is a possibility?
The question was, is the situation of the school such that bankruptcy is a possibility? We have not evaluated the latest financial statements of the school, so I can't speak to that.
Just another example of what goes on in the treasurer's office. The charter school audits are actually statutorily supposed to go to the local government commission, which also meets in this room, and I'm the chair of that commission upstairs. And it's just another example of how intertwined everything in this building is. Health plan, LGC, or whatever. Yes, sir.
Can I ask you a question also, and out of curiosity here? When this particular charter school, which is located in Northampton County, KIPP has other locations. So is that distinguished specifically by location? Because I know we have a KIPP Halifax, which is right across the river from Northampton County. So what would happen, for example, if a teacher from there went from that county to our county? I guess they become eligible again, but there's a clear distinction between this one location versus the other location owned by the same KIPP organization?
That's correct, Mr. Brown. The KIPP organization has campuses, and each of the campuses may or may not be a part of our retirement system. We've had several that are, and the withdrawal here would pertain to Gaston specifically. And if a teacher or another employee of KIPP Gaston were to move to a KIPP campus that does participate in the retirement system, then they would be required to participate.
Interesting. Thank you.
Great question. All right. We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk will call the roll.
We didn't get a motion.
We have a motion from the state board.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second.
Greg Patterson, second.
Thank you, Greg. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
We have a motion from Oliver Holly, second from Greg Patterson.
Right.
Treasurer Follow? Aye. Barbara Gibson?
Aye.
Dirk German?
Aye.
Jeffrey Winstead? Aye. John Eckhausen? Joshua Smith?
Aye.
Brewer?
Aye.
Linda Gunter? And Margaret Reed.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 12, determination regarding supplemental insurance rebates. A moment ago, we talked about the rebate we went back to our members because of people's inability to go and get dental service, for example, in COVID. Several years ago, I, along with staff, negotiated a better known as a profit sharing plan that before COVID, these plans ended up being more profitable to the insurance company than the writing ratio initially estimated that we would share in these profits. That's what you're about to hear a little bit about.
So yes, item 12, supplemental voluntary insurance rebates. If we could have everyone make sure they mute. We're going to have to go ahead and mute. So Greg, you might be off mute.
No, sir, I'm muted.
Oh, Brenda. I have to mute Brenda.
Yes.
The Retirement Systems Division did receive notice from Pierce Insurance that the Department of State Treasury will receive an estimated $3 million in a performance award. As the Treasurer mentioned, the division had negotiated with Healthcare a couple years ago. The memo included in your materials describes how supplemental voluntary insurance rebates can be directed to the unfunded solvency reserve fund in order to offset unfunded liabilities of the health benefit fund and TSERS. There are 3 conditions be met in order for the state treasurer to direct the funds to the reserve as detailed in the memo. One of the conditions requires that the TSERS board determines that the rebate funds are not needed to pay future administrative costs. As stated earlier, when I did the annual report on the supplemental insurance, since the Retirement Systems Division does not use state funds to administer these benefits, staff recommends that the TSERS board determine that the rebates received from UHC are not needed to pay future administrative costs.
So, another piece of great news, $2 million back to the members themselves for, and now $3 million as far as profit sharing rebates. So, another example of taking advantage of our largeness. And do I hear a motion to affirm that supplemental insurance rebates are not needed to pay future administrative costs of the supplemental and voluntary insurance benefit program? From the Teachers Board. Thank you. A second? Jeffrey second. Further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Barbara Gibson.
Aye.
Dirk German.
Aye.
Greg Patterson.
Aye.
Joshua Smith.
Aye.
Lance Brewer. Lance Brewer. I don't hear you, Lance. Linda Gunter.
Aye.
Margaret Reeder.
I'm sorry. Lynn Brewer, aye.
Margaret Reeder, aye.
And Oliver Holly.
Aye.
Thank you all. We're going to start speeding up a little bit. And the item number 13, local system. This is similar to what you've heard earlier about the TSERS and the National Guard. And now we're going to the local system for the same summary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a similar agenda item. There are 2 big differences to keep in mind when we're talking about the local system compared to all the other policies we're looking at today. The first is that in the local system, the policy is describing the decision that the local board makes under the authority delegated to it by the General Assembly to establish the contribution rates for local governments. And all the other ones, we're talking about making a recommendation to the General Assembly. And this one, you're actually setting a contribution rate. The second difference is that in the local system, the way the ECRISP is designed, it's a little bit further along the spectrum of being focused on stability. And that makes sense because in the local system, and all the other ones, we may have one big budgeter, the state, and one big funder. In the local system, we have hundreds of budgeters, hundreds of funders. And so there's more of a focus on stability. And there's an understanding that to design something more stable, there's a good chance the policy will call for contributions greater than the actuaries say is minimally required. But there's also no guarantee that the total contributions during the 5 years will be equal to the ADAC, the actuaries amount. There's some chance they will not be. When the ECRISP was put into place in 2016, it was thought at the time it was a 75% chance that it would deliver contributions at least equal to the ADEC over time. But it had to be amended halfway through the time frame, as many of you will recall, to make that happen. With the proposal you're going to see today, as the staff actuary, I've analyzed that question by running 1,000 randomly generated investment return scenarios. And I estimated that for around 80 to 85% of the scenarios, the proposal that you're going to see today would deliver contributions at least equal to the ADEC. But that's 10 to 15% where it doesn't. It would be possible to design something with even higher chance of contributing what the actuaries say is minimally required, but that would cost more to the governments, and it may carry a higher risk of requiring more contributions than needed. So these are the issues that have to be balanced. So let's look at the current policy briefly and how we're proposing it would change. On page 6 of item 13D, as in Delta of the agenda, there is a summary of the employer contribution rates under the current policy. It's a table, and you can see what those have been. It started out increasing by 0.25% of pay, which is roughly $15 million a year across all the local governments every year. Halfway through, it had to be changed to 1.2% of pay every year, which is about $80 million across all the local governments that they've been incrementally increasing for the past few years. The contribution rate for law enforcement officers is 0.75% of pay greater than the rate for all other employees under the current policy. In the policy over the last 6 years, there's also been a concept called a guardrail, where if the ADEC from the actuaries turned out to be very different from plan, then there would be an adjustment toward what the actuaries said was needed. But the difference would have been very big to call for that adjustment, and the adjustment would have been some sort of slight. What we've learned over the last 6 years was that the guardrail was a good idea, but it needed to be tighter. That's part of the proposal.
Or Amy, a chair, has it, and we can sort of more widely distribute
Someone has their phone on mute.
information on.
Thank you, Dean. Kevin, go ahead, something very quickly. We do.
Okay. On page 7 of this presentation, so again, we're looking at a reasonably manageable scenario. If all the assumptions are actually met, 6.5% return, but there's still a lot of risk that could not happen. And I have estimated that there's about a more than 50% chance that at some point during the period, there would be an increase in the contribution rate of more than 1% of pay again. And, we're hoping to avoid that. There would also be, if there was no policy like this, there would be about a 40% chance of at least one of the V shapes happening during that period, which is especially risky for the local system because we have more than 900 local governments and 900 different budgeters and funders in the local system who have to cope with that V shape. And for those of you close to local governments, you can imagine that if we had a contribution rate of 11 and then we told all the local governments, well, next year it'll go down to 10, but then it'll go up to 12, they would say, well, why can't we just keep it at 11 the whole time? Many people would say that. And that's the type of thing we're trying to accomplish by this stability. On page 8, here's the policy recommendation. The planned step increases during the next 5 years would become 0.75% of pay. The things that are 1.2 right now would go down to 0.75% of pay, which is about $50 million incremental increases. It's a reduction from the incremental increases of $80 million that the governments are seeing today. The guardrail, however, will be tightened. That means that if the actuaries say that what's minimally required is more than the plan by at least 1% of pay, the plan will move halfway toward the actuary's recommendation. And starting in the 3rd year of the policy, that adjustment can work both ways. It not only could go up, the contribution rate could go down if the actuaries are saying that what's minimally required is a lot less than the plan. Then the plan will be adjusted downward, and the contribution rate for local governments could even decrease in a cautious way in that scenario. The difference between contributions for law enforcement officers and everybody else, you need to mention that on page 9. Right now, that difference is 0.75% of pay. The proposal is according to the actuaries, the true difference in cost within the next 5 years will be more than 1% of pay. And so the proposal is to gradually move from 0.75% so that in the first year of this policy for law enforcement officers, governments are contributing 1% more, and then 1.25%, 1.5%, 1.75%, and 2%. So that by the end of this 5-year period, the contribution rate for law enforcement officers will be 2% greater than for other employees. At the bottom of page 9, you can see a provision added to the policy for the board to use its discretion in a very limited situation where the board could, but doesn't have to, spread out a big increase that it might foresee over 2 years instead of just 1. And then on page 10, there are some numerical examples describing how the contribution rate for both non-law enforcement and law enforcement will be set. In the interest of time, I will just talk about the first column, but I'm happy to answer questions that you may have related to the others. So in the first column, scenario 1, we have the previous year's contribution rate for non-law enforcement employees was 13.75%. That's the number at the top. And what would be happening is that we increase that rate by 0.75% of pay. That's the planned increase underlying this policy, so that for non-law enforcement, you end up with a contribution rate of 14.5%. For law enforcement employees, what we're looking at here in this example is the 4th year of the 5 in the policy. So in that 4th year, the extra contribution rate for law enforcement officers would be 1.75%. That's the 1 scaling up to 2 by the end of the period. So in the 4th year, it's 1.75. 14.5 plus 1.75 is 16.25. So in this example, the contribution rate for local governments will be 14.5 for non-law enforcement and 16.25 for law enforcement. In the interest of time, I won't go over all the others unless there's questions we're happy to address. The Fire and Rescue Squad Workers Pension Fund. Spend a moment on that one. This is 13B as in Baker. And I'm on page 4. Under the current policy, the recommended appropriation is the greater of 2 numbers. The first is the current year's appropriation plus $350,000. The $350,000 figure is based on the estimated revenue growth from the tax on gross property insurance. The second number is the ADEC from the actuary. So you look at the current year plus $350,000 or the ADEC from the actuary, and the greater of the 2 is what the funding recommendation is. On page 5, the proposed policy would maintain the basic funding structure, including using the greater of those 2 items, and including the $350,000 increase that's built in right now. That would not change. On page 6, this is one of the policies that has considerations about recommending a benefit increase. And those considerations would basically be retained in the next 5 years, except that it would more clearly define some of them with numbers and decision points to help the board in its annual decision making. Specifically, it would say that the board could consider recommending, but would not have to recommend, a benefit increase if the increase is no greater than inflation, if the board is also recommending sufficient funding in a single year, if the board is also recommending that the contribution rate from members, firefighters and rescue squad workers who currently contribute $10 a month, that be increased or maintained at a certain level that would keep with a 50-50 cost sharing goal for certain benefits. And if the board has considered any changes in the law that applies to the tax on gross property insurance. And that part's important because that tax goes towards several programs benefiting firefighters and rescue squad workers. On page 7, there are a few examples of how the recommended appropriation amount will work. They're fairly straightforward. So, you've seen several tables like this by now, so happy to entertain questions on them, but these are examples, numerical examples of how the appropriation amount will work. And finally, on page 8, there are examples of what it would mean for a benefit improvement to be fully funded, the BIFR. We saw a table like this in the National Guard presentation, and it's the same concept. You start with the actuarial cost of the benefit improvement, but the board may be able to apply any overfunding or anticipated overfunding of the plan to apply it toward the cost of the benefit increase. And that concludes my remarks on the local system and firefighters and rescue squad workers pension fund funding policies.
Any questions?
I have several questions I'd like to ask. First of all, can you give us a scenario for local government in that over the 5-year plan? The first question I have, every year this board or the local government board determines the percentage increase, regardless of what the plan calls for in a 5-year cycle. We can come back and review that recommendation, either modify it, keep it, or lower it, or whatever. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Morse. The policy is a policy, and the board still has the authority in any given year to set the contribution rate wherever it deems fit. Policy provides you guidance.
Well, I'm as a new board member, I'm glad to hear that, because I have more comfort level with that 5-year plan, even though we have the ability to go back and evaluate. My second question is, and this is more as a, and we discussed it, and I did have an opportunity to talk to the treasurer. What I'd like to know, or I'd like to recommend, is that in subsequent years, if the plan sees significant increases, right now is a local government unit that has to fund those increases, and that the employees have had a very stable contribution rate. I believe it's been over 20 years since and I know it's a General Assembly process, but there hasn't been an increase in the local government employees contribution rate over a long period of time. Is that correct?
It's been 6% for a very long time.
More than 30 or 40 years.
What I'd like to ask the staff is that if we find ourselves in a dire situation, I just don't think local governments in the future will be able to absorb significant increases without having severe challenges with their citizens and the liabilities. And that if that case ever comes to be, I'd like to know if we had the flexibility, if we could look at the process or the flexibility of potentially going to the General Assembly and asking that we have a process in place that if it's a dire situation, that we allow that we can go to the employee and look at an increase in their contribution rate to help offset the entity's increase. And in our discussions with the treasurer earlier, and I agree with them 100%, there would have to be some kind of tier system, because I wouldn't want the rank and file employees in local government, those in the lower salary ranges, to bear a burden that would be not as difficult for those who are in the higher end level salaries, such as administrators, managers, et cetera. So can we, over the next year or so, see what can be put in place as a policy to engage the local government employees in this process, and have a system evaluated whether it could be implemented through our Orbit system to see if that could ever be a implementation factor. Again, in summary of my position, I'm just concerned about the ability of local governments to absorb entirely these rate increases. I know local governments have had excellent fringe benefit packages in the past for their employees, such as healthcare providing those premiums, but over the years, those benefits have been reduced because the local governments just could not afford. So instead of funding 100% of retirement, the healthcare premiums, they've gone to 50%. They've eliminated family coverages. Those are the type of things local government have done to meet their budget demands. And so I hope we would have some flexibility for local governments should we face crisis in funding.
Thank you. Mr. Morse called me about this, and to clarify something that I may have said incorrectly or may have been heard incorrectly. I think what I've said was that when you look at the 50-year history of this plan, it was never intended for interest rates to be this low, people to retire this early, and to live this long. And if we had a piece of Play-Doh and we could do it all over again, given what has happened to some levels of government salaries, not obviously everyone, that we would have developed a tier system so that those that make more contribute more. And well, obviously that wasn't done. So I think that this topic, obviously, I'm opposed to increasing employee contribution rates. But when I say that we're going to preserve, strengthen, but we got to figure out how to sustain the plan for the next generation of public service workers, we had to have a collective conversation with the board, with the stakeholders, with the school of government, with the Big Ten, with the chief financial officers of the LGERS cities and counties, and all this needs to come together. And it's even more, a little bit peculiar. You heard a moment ago about our orbit system. I'm the least qualified person to be talking about technology in any way, shape, or form. But when it was built, it wasn't built to be technologically flexible in terms of tiers. For example, even when I start to inquire about if a minimum, everybody came together and said we need to have a minimum retirement age in these plans. Doesn't mean you can't retire when you want to retire. It's just that you draw till then. That's something that used to be in this system 4 times. We've had 4 minimum retirement ages in the system, but we've never had that in orbit. Am I saying this correctly? We've never had a minimum retirement age either taken in or put in or taken out of orbit. So even something that simple, I would just think it would just be a light switch. It used to be there and it's not there anymore. Let's just go. It's not quite that easy. So I appreciate you calling me about this. I appreciate the opportunity to clarify what I've said about all this. And I would just add one final thing. Unlike a lot of situations, as you heard me say before, Charlotte and Charlotte are spelled similarly and pronounced similarly, and they're both southern towns in North Carolina. But Charlotte and Charlotte are in far different boats. And I go a little bit further to say that we have some of the economics of Charlotte that are within the city of Charlotte in some places. So we got to keep all this in context, but especially for rural North Carolina, which we're dealing with mightily at the local government commission, as took over another town last week. This is East and in the West. When we think about rural North Carolina really has nowhere else to go to make these pension contributions except on the backs of property taxpayers. And when you start looking at that in the real context of the forgotten woman and man of this state, and look at the complexity of fixed and lower income individuals in those areas that have been depopulating for 20 years, and look at how disproportionately that impacts fixed income and lower income people of North Carolina. I'm just editorializing to say that it's a great topic. It's a big topic. It's a conversation that needs to be had, and it needs to be irrigated, which means we just got to keep running water through this until we can come up with how to preserve, strengthen, and sustain the plan for the next generation of public service workers.
Again, I appreciate your comments, and I agree with you 100%. I think those are important issues. However, what I'd like to see, rather than irrigate the subject and moving it forward, is there some concrete action we can take now to start that conversation, to start that evaluation, so that when we see next 2 or 3 years that Charlotte doesn't have to bear that burden, its taxpayers covered, nor Valleys or anybody, any other small town. I would like to see some kind of affirmative action, wrong terminology, but I'd like to see some type of action this board takes today, if it's appropriate, sir, to start this dialogue.
And I think what we should do within the next 2 board meetings, because the next one's kind of heavy, we'll come back with maybe a structure and a strategy about how to look at this, if that's fair enough.
That sounds great. Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Any other questions? Do I hear a motion from the Elders Board to accept staff's recommendation?
Motion.
Second. Motion second. Any further discussion?
I'll not expect to have to vote on it.
Any further discussion? The only discussion part I would add is that we only have 3 levers in the Elders system. We have the employee contribution rate, and we have the employer contribution rate, and obviously whatever it gains. So we'd love to have 8 levers, so you could tweak them a little. And when it then that's the big umbrella. And under that umbrella, there are only really 2 levers that we have control over. We don't have control over life expectancies. We don't have control over the Federal Reserve. We don't have control of the stock market. The only 2 levers up under that umbrella we have control over are minimum retirement age and changing the multiplier. And that's the 1.82 or 1.85 that you multiply the yearly pay times the average final compensation. And even when you look at that, and I'm sorry I didn't bring it with me today, but you have to look at it in context that we have a lot of local governments that are making 401, 457 contributions to these plans in addition to making the Elders contribution plan. And what we've now found, and it's not a secret, nobody was keeping it secret, but sometimes you don't know until you ask, that in many of these instances, the match, it's not a match, it's just a contribution. So if you say, Jeffrey, you're going to get 3% of your salary, it's not 3% of your salary into a 401k if you put 3% in. In some cases, it's just 3%. So all this, and it's all different. There's 300, 200 units that are matching. 250 units of the 500. There's 550 cities, 600 counties. So all that needs to be, when I say irrigate, looked at in totality.
Were those matches mandated by the legislation, by the General Assembly? That's the voluntary contribution.
Yeah, but they're not even matches. I thought they were all matches. Homer's got, Tony's got a lot of experience with this topic, but
Yeah, it's not a match, it's just a direct, ours is a direct 5% contribution.
yeah. So if the city of King is a direct 5% contribution, and somebody else in this room with a local government, it may be a match. Right.
And we don't do a match at all, but we've discussed it over the years, but we considered just a flat amount for everyone.
And it's hard to do a match when these annual required contributions, but that the Elders is placing on you is doing this. So, anyway, thank you. Good comments. So in the next 2 board meetings, the strategy and structure for looking at this. Thank you. All right. We have a motion second. Any further discussion? Clerk will call a roll on the Elders.
Okay, we have a motion from Jeffrey Morse and a second from Homer Dearman. Dale Falwell?
Aye.
Is public comment allowed?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I put it in the chat, but I don't think anybody saw it. This is Sarah Collins of the League of Municipalities. I just do have some public comment from our executive committee of our board. Thank you for the time to speak today. We really appreciate the Retirement System Division staff taking time to run through the future ECRISP options with our staff at the League, City County Managers Association's Retirement Committee, as well as the County Commission Association. Our executive committee took recommendation from that Retirement Committee of the City County Managers Association and supports the recommendation that y'all are about to approve for the ECRISP going forward for the 5 years after fiscal year 2022. We appreciate that it provides certainty to our members and that it has the potential for a decrease in contributions in future years if those guardrails are met. Their discussions, our executive committee's discussions, were very thoughtful on this topic, especially coming off the past 3 years of those 1.2 increases that equaled $80 million a year. So they do have a support for your decision today. However, they couch their support with a little bit of a caveat, which kind of matches discussions that are going on right now, that reforms are needed to the system to decrease the pressure on the employer contribution rates. We're very glad that it looks like there's going to be discussions moving forward on that. They will re-examine their support of this ECRIS annually to ensure that some reform measures are taking place. Reforms to sustain the system, as the treasurer noted, are things that we really, really want to see happen and have discussed in past with staff looking at those issues like the multiplier for new hires and minimum retirement age. So we look forward to continuing these discussions. And we appreciate all the comments and thoughtful discussion by the LGERS board members. As far as the supplemental support that some of our members are giving, I believe the LEO, the law enforcement officers, are required a 5% contribution by statute, doesn't require a match. So I think a lot of times that's where you see it, and people have provided it for other subsets of employees for parity issues. But again, as to the decision you're about to make, our executive committee supports this, but does so with the hope that reforms can be seen in the future. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you for those remarks. Any others? And we look forward to continue our partnership with the League, County Commission Association, School of Government on these topics. Clerk, call a roll.
Alan Wansi.
Aye.
Brenda Howerton.
Aye.
Clea Atkinson. Clea Atkinson. Don't hear Clea. Greg Patterson.
Aye.
Kevin Gordon.
Aye.
Lance Brewer. Lance Brewer.
Aye.
Melody Brady.
Aye.
And Tony Brown.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to the applications of qualified political subdivisions, state to become participating employers in the LGERS system.
Thank you. Any eligible employer desiring to participate in the local system may apply to the local board to join the system. On the agenda this morning are 3 employers who have filed applications to participate beginning July 1st, 2021. They are the Lincoln County Airport Authority with 3 employees, the town of Swepsonville in Alamance County with 3 employees, and the Washington Housing Authority with 23 employees. All 3 have submitted resolutions from the governing boards committing to make the required contributions if the board accepts their applications. The Attorney General's office has confirmed that all 3 of these entities are eligible to join the local system. RSD staff, together with staff from the State and Local Government Finance Division of the Department of the State Treasurer, have reviewed the most recent available audited financial statements of each employer and found that all 3 are financially fit to participate in the local system and meet the obligations that would be required of them. That concludes my remarks.
I hear a motion to accept the Washington Housing Authority from the LGERS board.
So moved.
Second. Second. Any further discussion? Not, the clerk will call the roll.
All right, so we have a motion. Who gave the motion? Tony Brown. So Mr. Brown with the motion, and then Jeffrey Morse with second. Treasurer Falwell? Aye. Alan Bwansi?
Aye.
Brenda Howerton? Clea Atkinson? Greg Patterson?
Aye.
Was I muted? Brenda Howerton.
Thank you, Brenda. Homer Dearman?
Aye.
Kevin Gordon?
Aye.
Lance Brewer?
Aye.
Melody Brady? Melody?
Aye.
And that's it.
Thank you. Now we accept a motion from the LGERS board to accept Swepsonville.
I'll make
Greg
a
Patterson, so moved.
second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Not, the clerk will call the roll.
Dale Falwell?
Aye.
Alan Bwansi? Alan Bwansi? I didn't hear a response. Brenda Howerton,
Aye.
Clea Atkinson, Homer Dearman,
Aye.
Jeffrey Morse,
Aye.
Kevin Gordon,
Aye.
Lance Brewer,
Aye.
Melody Brady,
Aye.
Thank you. The ayes have it. And now a motion from the Lincoln County Airport Authority.
So moved. Homer.
Motion second.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. And I guess under any further discussion, it's important to point out they've been contributing to the system, but this was how would you describe it?
The employees of the Lincoln County Airport Authority have previously been considered by the county of Lincoln County to be employees of the county, and they've reported them as their own employees for years until now.
Okay, thank you. Motion second being heard. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell,
Aye.
Alan Wonsey, Brenda Howerton,
Aye.
Clea Atkinson, Greg Patterson,
Aye.
Kevin Gordon,
Aye.
Lance Brewer,
Aye.
Melody Brady,
Aye.
and Tony Brown.
Aye.
Thank you. Now, item 15, firefighter and rescue workers advisory panel appointment recommendation.
Okay. So members of the firefighters and rescue squad workers pension fund advisory panel were first appointed by the LGERS board in January 2014 for 4-year terms. In April 2018, the LGERS board appointed or reappointed members to the panel for additional 4-year terms. However, in 2018, it was thought that Kevin Gordon's appointment did not expire until March 2020, but that was the expiration of his appointment to the LGERS board, not the advisory panel. He's continued to serve on the advisory panel since 2018. We believe the oversight in 2018 should be corrected. We recommended the LGERS board reappoint Kevin Gordon to the advisory panel through January 16, 2022, which will align his term with the rest of the advisory panel. I don't know if there's any questions about that.
Kevin, thank you very much again. Do I have a motion to approve the appointment of Kevin Gordon?
Greg Patterson, so moved. Easiest thing we've done today.
Well, we got to get a second.
Second, Homer Dearman.
Okay. Motion second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Alan Wonsey.
Aye.
Brenda Howerton.
Aye.
Clea Atkinson. Jeffrey Morse.
Aye.
I don't know. Do we ask? No. I guess Kevin can't do vote for himself. Lance Brewer. Lance Brewer. I don't hear Lance. Melody Brady.
Aye.
And Tony Brown.
Aye.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, board members. We're now to other business and public comments. And we have people signed up to speak to the public. And we'll start with Senator Sarah Crawford. Senator, thank you for joining us.
This is Rick Hauser with the Youngsville ABC Board. It's our understanding she had to attend the session and is not available right now.
Thank you, Rick. You're next.
Well, I had my comments addressed to say good morning, but it's almost good afternoon. I appreciate you allowing us to speak. My name is Rick Hauser, and I represent the Youngsville ABC Board as its chairman, and I'm speaking today to request the board to take one of two actions today. First, the Youngsville ABC requests this board modify its agenda to add consideration of the Youngsville ABC's application, which was submitted to the retirement system almost 18 months ago. Secondly, if the board is not prepared, however, to consider our application today, we request the board fix a date and time for a special meeting during the month of May to consider our application. I and the town's attorney have communicated to the board with Secretary Mr. Thomas Causey. If you've not been provided the town's correspondence transmitted to him by the town's attorney, I urge you to read it in detail. This stated, I'll summarize the nature of our correspondence now. In short, Youngsville ABC understands the reservations of this board in accepting additional ABC boards as new members. However, we firmly hold that the reasons explained to us for non-consideration of our application, namely the retirement system's current funding deficiencies and/or tax compliance issues, unequivocally do not confer legal authority on this board to indefinitely withhold consideration of our membership application. Quite to the contrary, this board's inaction and your staff's administrative decision to withhold consideration of our membership application are both unlawful and discriminatory. In light of these facts, Youngsville ABC urges you to formally consider and approve its application for membership and in order to avoid wasteful litigation relating to this matter. As harsh as this might sound, if the board chooses not to act as it is required by statute, Youngsville ABC has no choice but to file a writ to compel its action. Even if you deny Youngsville ABC's application for membership, we will at least have a decision that we can appeal. However, this board's inaction has completely deprived us and the system's employees of our ABC system of due process. More importantly, the board's inaction goes against foundational principles of good government all public employees should strive to protect. At this point, I think it's relevant to also point out that Youngsville ABC only has 2 full-time employees. And what is more, in just the 3 years I have served on the ABC board, we have distributed over $300,000 in additional net income over and above our statutory requirements to the town. I believe the financial stressors on the retirement system must be dealt with by setting the correct funding levels for all members. I also believe ending new membership should be done by legislation and not by unlawful administrative decision making. And we should focus on solving all of these problems with the highest level of integrity and transparency. Please accept my sincerest gratitude for your time, attention, and public service. I'm happy to take any questions.
Does any board member have any questions?
I'm not familiar with this ongoing issue. I'm new to the board, so can I be brief sometime later? I don't want to take up the time of this board right now. I'd like to be brief a little bit.
Tom, you want?
Youngsville, they did apply. I think it was back in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. I know Patrick's done a lot of work with them, trying to get the materials together, and we did finally get a application together, a complete one in February of this year. So there's been a lot of work done to try to get that together, and we have traded correspondence back and forth with them, especially over the years, last couple of years with Patrick, and then more recently in trying to set the agenda for the board, and so just this week we've been corresponding with them on the ABC boards, and we've been corresponding with their attorneys. It's been myself and the team looking at the issues, and we did send them a letter. I believe it was last week, with concerns about some information from the NC Association of the ABC boards regarding whether ABC boards would be considered governmental employers. And then we also sent information to them about the General Assembly is considering House Bill 278, which, would not allow ABC boards to be part of LGERS. And so these things are going on. We just got the application complete, and these other things are going on. And so we wanted to pause, discuss it as a department, and, how should we move forward, with the ABC board question in Youngsville in particular, has been questioning us about just yesterday as well. So
Thank you for that update.
thank you. So the board hasn't heard about it. So you're hearing it. They're hearing it for the first time as well.
The staff not made.
Right, staff from staff.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hauser, for joining us, and more to come. We'll now go to board members. We'll go virtually, see if any board members has any closing comments. How about person?
I just, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You have the floor, sir.
All right. I want to continue to thank the entire staff there. As I know, and looking at the numbers that we had at our last meeting with the increase that we normally have from January, just as I would plan to anticipate a lot of additional retirements in result of COVID. So thank you for the entire team there for your work. But as Elizabeth City, North Carolina boy, I just want to ask that we can continue to pray for my hometown, as well as the unfortunate news that I received at the beginning of this meeting that is going on in the western part of our state in Watauga. So pray a special request of peace for all in our wonderful, great state and for everyone involved. So that's all I have to say today, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Superintendent. And it's hard to believe it's been a year. Has it been a year since I was at your graduation?
Yes, sir. And you are always welcome to come at any other graduation.
I just want to tell you, there's been a little mystery around my house since I was over there. I have a hat that has SRF on it, which is our son's initials, and no one can figure out where the heck it came from. So, Superintendent, would you like to tell them where that hat came from?
I'm sorry, say it again. I missed it. You went out on me.
It had SRF, and I knew I was in Terrell County. I knew I was with you, but it was the Skummernock River Festival.
Yeah, exactly. Scopenon Rivers Festival. And we are definitely looking forward for it coming back in the midst of COVID. And I would take this time to go ahead and mark your calendars in October, because if the Lord willing, we're going to have it. We would love to have you down there at the Scopenon River Festival.
Thank you. And don't want to take up too much time, but is your 4-H club camp open yet?
They're working on it. We have a couple of activities that are scheduled to be planned. But of course, with the announcement we received, yesterday from Governor Cooper around the mass changes for outdoors, that's been a big help for us just as a county and outdoor activities. So I expect that should be opening soon, and we will be getting Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and all other organizations into the county to utilize that facility.
Thank you. I've been bending the ear of the folks at North Carolina State to get that reopened on your behalf for the economic vitality that brings to your community. And because it's owned by and managed by North Carolina State. So thank you, Superintendent, and thank you for those words. And our prayers do go out to everyone from the east to the west. And I'd like to actually adjourn our meeting. Any further comments from anybody in person? I'm sorry those of you aren't here with us to see Tony Brown's tie. I don't know how you're going to be able to do better next time. But,
I made an impression. Thank you.
There's a history here that if you compliment somebody on their tie, they're supposed to take it off and give it to you.
I'll be glad to give it away.
But anyway.
My better half may not like that because this was a Christmas tie.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. So, Jeff, thank you, and thank all of you for making the trip to attend in person. I'd like to adjourn the meeting, and in honor of the grief that our state is going through, both in Elizabeth City and in Watauga County. And I'd like to close the meeting in honor of all those who are suffering and grieving for all kinds of reasons. And with that, I'll accept a motion from the Teachers Board to adjourn.
I'll make that
Greg
motion.
Patterson, motion for adjournment.
And,
Second, Mark Reeder.
Who did we have for motion?
figure that out. I think it's Margaret.
Margaret?
She's on teachers. Any further discussion? Not, clerk, call the roll.
Jill Falwell? Barbara Gibson? Right here, Barbara. Kirk Sherman?
Aye.
Greg Patterson?
Aye.
Jeffrey Winstead? Aye. John Ebbinghausen?
Aye.
Joshua Smith?
Aye.
Lance Brewer? Lance Brewer? Linda Gunter?
Aye.
Oliver Holly?
Aye.
Thank you. Teasers is adjourned. I hear a motion to adjourn the Elders Board. Motion. Thank you. Second.
Second.
Tony is the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Dale Falwell?
Aye.
Alan Wansey?
Aye.
Brenda Howerton? Aye. Greg Patterson?
Aye.
Homer Dearman?
Aye.
Kevin Gordon? Lance Brewer? Melody Brady?
Aye.
And the ayes have it, and we're hereby adjourned. Thank you all. Have a great day.